Hi, I'm Pastor Theron. Welcome to Church Where You Are and Story Sermons, relating life's experiences to the Bible. I'd like to tell you a story. But first, I'd like to say a special word of thanks and welcome to some good folks back home in the state of Idaho, my buddy Daryl and my mom, to some other family members, my cousin Bruce, my cousin Brenda, and my cousin Krista and Kevin and their kids, and I look forward to seeing y'all again, and then to some of my ancestors, the Watson family, Milt and Bill and Elizabeth and Malcolm, and out there on the family farm. Great place to have grown up, a great place to go and visit. I still call it home. I've been gone longer than I lived there, but still remember all of those things with great familiarity and love. Was just up there last summer and got to revisit some old memories and some old places out there in Rubens, out along the river, in town, running along the levee. Just the places that I remember from my youth, having lived in a small town called Orfino as a very small child, and then moving into town, Lewiston, at age about 6, and a couple places here and there, and going to elementary school at Camelot Elementary and Sacagawea Junior High, down to Jennifer Junior High, to high school, being out on the field, running track and playing tennis, and watching football games and basketball games, and watching baseball at the college, Lewis Clark State College, and all of these things that I remember in my youth. I attended a semester of college. I kind of got hoodwinked into it. That's another story for another day. And wound up joining the Army. Now, one of the reasons that I joined the Army, I was unsure in those days whether I wanted to fully devote myself to college or to go in the Army. And I realized that somewhere about age 9 or somewhere in grade school, I had this idea that I wanted to join the military. And so I did. And I remembered that much later while I was in basic training. But when I joined the Army, I did it because I didn't want to look back on my life and regret not having done it, and wondering what could have been, and what things would have been like. And so I thought, what things would have been like. And so I thought, let me just go do it. I'll spend a couple of years of my life. It wound up completely changing my life. Nothing after that would ever be the same. I got married after active duty. We lived in Lewiston for a couple of years and promptly moved to Louisiana. I spent the next almost 25 years in Louisiana. I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to college. I went to work. I continued in the National Guard. I loved my family. I paid my taxes. I raised my kids. Pastored a couple of churches. I just lived and worked in Louisiana. But for those 25 years, the same question repeated in my head, and repeated in my head, and repeated in my head. What is a mountain kid from Idaho doing in the swamps of Louisiana? And I pondered that for years. How did I wind up there? How did things turn out the way they did? Why was I there? What was I supposed to be doing? And so I started thinking about how all of these things interconnected. And what I came up with was this. Had I not joined the Army, I probably would have taken a job there in town. I would have gone out hunting in the fall and riding a four-wheeler and hunting in the mountains and fishing in the streams. I probably would have worked at the tire dealership down on Main Street, or sold appliances like my dad, or sold cars, or sold insurance, or taken over the hardware store that my parents owned when I was a teenager. Maybe I would have wound up out on the homestead land that Bruce still farms. Who knows? But I think I would have been fine, but I would not have excelled in the way that I believe that I have. In Louisiana, in the National Guard, I was promoted. I went to college. I taught school. After receiving my bachelor's degree from McNeese in education, I wound up teaching 8th grade science for a semester and decided that that wasn't for me and looked into going to seminary. While I was in seminary, I was approached with the idea of becoming a chaplain with the military. Felt that call to preach while I was still in Idaho. That story is already on Facebook here and on YouTube also, my call to preach. And I started thinking about how all of these things came together, not of my doing. This is all God's stuff, because I don't know that I would have retired from the military in Idaho. I don't know that I would have continued in the National Guard as long as I did. I don't know that I would have become an officer like I did, a chaplain like I did, and certainly not a preacher. And so my belief now is that God put me into the southern culture of Louisiana, where religion is more important. Going to church is more important. There's an appreciation for the military and for veterans and this type of thing. That's not to say that it's not important in Idaho and out in the Northwest, but it's just different. It's more important, let's call it, down in the South. And so it pushed me to achieve these goals, to strive and strain towards these goals. I don't know that I would have become a preacher. I don't know that I would have become anything more. I don't know. I don't know how things would have turned out, because you can't explore those ideas, but I have the idea that I wouldn't have. And so I needed to live in Louisiana to pursue these things, to continue in my military career, to continue towards the ministry that I'm still attempting to do. I don't know that it ever would have been accomplished in Idaho. And while I miss things of my homeland, while I miss things about the mountains and the streams that move and the rocks and the landscape and the history, we know from Scripture that a prophet is not welcome in his own hometown. He's not welcome among his own people. They remember you how you were. They remember you from back then. And if they remember you from back then, they'll try to hold you to back then. And they won't. It's difficult to continue. It's difficult to grow. It's difficult to excel. It's difficult to move forward. It's difficult to get any kind of traction and separate yourself from the history that the people have of you, because I wasn't always this person. And so in order for me to grow, I had to leave. I had to go somewhere else. I had to go somewhere foreign. And it was just enough similar that I could fit in, but it was just enough different that I was interested, and I began to grow, and I began to learn the language and the culture and the music and the food, and I've grown in all of those things, and I've learned through college, and I've learned through seminary, and I've learned through practical application, and I've learned through the ministry in my first church, and then my deployment to Iraq, and into my second church, and CPE, and all of these things that I don't think would have taken place had I stayed where I was comfortable, because growth takes place in the discomfort. Growth takes place in the challenges. Growth takes place in the difficult and the different, and it forces us outside of ourselves, outside of our comfort, to find these things. It also forces us to rely upon the Lord. It forces us to spend more time in prayer, and it forces us to be open to receiving what the Spirit might be directing us to do. Ultimately, it comes down to what it says in Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." I have added to that verse just a little bit. I say it this way: I know the plans I have for you, little man, declares the Lord. I might have had my plans. I might have been okay. I might have still prospered. I might have gone on to great things, but I don't think I would be who I am today. I absolutely and certainly would not be who I am today had I stayed, had I still been in my homeland. And now I find myself in different circumstances. About a year ago, my wife Misty and I left Louisiana. We drove all across the United States, north through Arkansas and into Missouri and Iowa and across South Dakota and into Wyoming and Montana and into Idaho on an epic trip in our camper, and made our way back to where we are now across the Midwest and into East Tennessee, where we find ourselves in this perfect blend of where I'm from and where I've been. In the mountains of Idaho and the swamps of Louisiana and the lush landscape of Louisiana. Here in Tennessee, it's a perfect blend, it seems, of both of those things. The lush nature, and yet there is mountains and rocks and water that moves, and it is a perfect blend. And I'm, even now, having been here a year, starting to wonder, why am I here? What is my purpose? What is the reason that God brought us to this place? It's not Idaho. It's not Louisiana, but it seems to be a perfect mix of the two. What is my purpose? And as of right now, I'm still struggling with that. I'm still wondering and questioning, why are we here? But let's go back to what it says in Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to give you a hope and a future, to help you prosper, not to harm you. And so we rely upon that. When our eyes don't see what the outcome is, when our imaginations aren't able to comprehend what the possibilities are, we go back to faith. We go back to the Word, and the Word says, I know the plans I have for you, little man, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. I look forward to seeing what God has for me and for us together in this place, to see how it all unfolds with an anticipation and an excitement, not a fear, not a dread, because God is in control of this thing. I don't know where you may be struggling in your life, how you might be wondering and doubting and questioning what the Lord is doing in your life, but let me promise you this. If you go to Jeremiah 29:11, it's in the Old Testament, towards the end, it says, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. This isn't promised just for me. This isn't a promise just for the people I know and that I'm associated with, but it's for everybody of all time, regardless of age or gender or ethnicity or background or what you believe. God is in control of the future that He has for you. We can trust that. We can rely on that. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just keep trudging forward. Just keep moving and believing and trusting that God has your best interest at heart, that He has a plan for you, and we can trust in that. So we will trust in Him. Thanks for watching.